All right, so let's continue on this first day of class. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do our introduction to statistics. So the first part was introduction to the course. This is actually where we're going to introduce the idea of statistics. So we're going to start off with a very brief MyLab overview. I just want everybody to be familiar, especially those of you who have not used the MyLab products before. And then we're going to learn all of our new math. So we're going to learn those two pieces of new math that I promised. We're going to learn about summation notation, and we're going to learn a new wrinkle to order of operations, and then that will be it for the math for this semester. All right, so the MyLab, just so that you're aware, again, access it through Canvas. Everybody has access to it if you're registered in the course. If you can get into Canvas, you now have access to MyLab. There's a variety of different resources like quizzes and tests, study plan, MyLab statistics homework. But basically what it is an online assignment manager, and you want to make sure that you get familiar with this. Go into it, poke around, try different things out, because this is going to be where the bulk of your work is going to be done in this particular course. So just a couple of things to kind of highlight here. You have your what to work on next. So your assignments are all loaded. They are all available right now. So you can work on everything starting this morning at 9 a.m. It's good to go. So feel free to work ahead if that's what fits your schedule. You can click on this little calendar up here and it will let you know what's available. So you can see that all of the assignments are available right now. And just so that you are aware, we do have a chapter 1, where'd it go? Chapter 1 pretest, but that is only for practice. So because of the summer session, we're starting today on chapter 1. And again, it would be cruel for me to say, oh yeah, before we even start class, do your pretest. Just be aware that the chapter 1 pretest is in your assignment list, but it's labeled with that big, huge practice label, so it will not count towards your final grade. I recommend do the practice, sit in front of it, tell it you're Batman, but just be aware that it will not count towards your final grade. So I will keep track of your grades. I'll post them in Canvas. MyLab will also try to calculate those, but I do not know how to get that out of your calculation. So just be aware that it's not going to be part of your final grade. All right, so it has what has been assigned. It also has what is due. So there's a number of tools in MyLab to help you keep on top of your assignments. Please explore it, try it out, look through it, become familiar with it so that you can maximize your effort in this course. In terms of the pretest, the homework assignments, basically it works in a way where you'll be asked questions, you can do calculations, you can fill in all that information. One of the things I like about MyStat or MyLab is that it gives you immediate feedback. So if you get something right, it'll let you know, good work, you got that right. Importantly, if you get something wrong, for example, in your homework, it will point you to information that will help you solve that homework assignment. So, for example, at least one of your answers is incorrect. Remember that the median is preferred to the mean in highly skewed distributions with outliers. So when we learn about the median, that'll make more sense. But when you get things wrong, it points you in that direction. So again, use those tools to help you when you're completing your homework. And again, make sure that you become familiar with MyLab. And to help you along with that, your first assignment, your first homework assignment, is actually just getting familiar with the MyMathLab. So it's a MyMathLab tutorial. It's a very brief assignment. It's the first one that you have that's coming up due tomorrow by midnight. And again, this is just a way to help you familiarize yourself with the workings of MyLab. All right, a few more things for you to be aware of. So for the homework assignments, so you'll see up here you have your first homework assignment, the MyMathLab tutorial. For your homework assignments, your number of attempts are not limited. So you'll notice here that this little choice here that goes, hey, limit the number of times students can work each question. I did not. So on your homework, if you get your homework question wrong, feel free to try it again. And if you get it wrong again, feel free to try it again. And if you get it wrong again, feel free to try it again. It will score your highest score. So you can't do worse. It'll score your highest score. So again, don't be satisfied with getting things wrong. Try it again, try it again, try it again. I will let you know that MyLab has a few little idiosyncrasies that might be a little bit frustrating sometimes. So for example, it requires oftentimes in a question the exact number of significant digits, that is the exact number of decimal places. So if the answer is 3, it will accept only 3.00. It lets you know that, it will tell you that, but if you do get it wrong again, just go through it again, try it again, and you can do that as many times as you want. I have not limited the number of times you can attempt any particular question. All right, so that also brings us to our Chapter 1 pretest. As I said, practice only. It will not be included in your final grade, but it's a nice little thing for you to poke around in, take a look at, and give it a shot for the Chapter 1 pretest. Yep. Nope. Nope. So pretests are coming up right now. It's a good question though, but pretests are coming up right now. So this is your pretest settings, and again, no limited number of attempts for the pretest. So it's called a test, but it's really pre-practice, I would say. So again, you know, if you do your pretest and you get it wrong, try it again. And if you get a question wrong, try it again. It's there for you to practice. It's there for you, again, to stand in front of that mirror and just keep saying, I'm Batman, I'm Batman, I'm Batman, until we get it absolutely right. And you do have the save for later option. All right, so you can leave and return later to complete the test. So once you've completed a question, I think the only limitation for that is it can't save a partial question completion. So as soon as you finish a question, if you think that's enough for the night, you can save it and come back later and start it up again. You have that option as well. And again, you can try it as many times as you would like. And that goes for both the pre and the post tests. Those are your settings for your tests. All right, and the last thing I want to mention for MyLab is know your due date. There is a lot of stuff that we do in this course. We got our pre-test, we got our post-test, we have our homework assignments. Usually they're due the day after class by midnight. Sometimes they're due a little bit earlier than that. If it's the class before an exam session, that's when the due dates get a little bit weird. Please know your due dates, because one of the things about using an automated system that can give you that really good immediate feedback is that at the due date, it grades you and will give you that immediate feedback as well. So we can't open it up after the due date in order for you to complete it because it's already been graded. So please be aware of your due dates. It's your responsibility to be on top of those, get it done by that time. And again, you can work ahead. So if you know you got a busy week coming up, you want to do your chapter 6 pretest early, go ahead, give it a shot, do that. Work ahead, but definitely be aware of your due dates. All right, any questions on that? Yep.
So, if you have like 14% in the pretest and then you complete the study plan mastery, you're going to add more points to your home.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the question is about the pretest versus the mastery points. So your mastery points, just to be clear, it won't add any points to your pretest, but if you say get 50% on your pretest, right? So you tried it a bunch of times, but let's say that it's just not making sense, right? We come to the class because this is where it will finally make sense. So if you're struggling with your pretest, you only get 50%, that's fine. After you do the pretest, the post-test, the homework, and all that kind of stuff, you can go to your study plan. It will have quizzes. It will have mastery points for you to earn. And let's say that there's 3 mastery points that it's identified, and you get all 3 of them. You practice, you do all 3 of them. That'll give you 100% on your study plan. What I will do is I will use that grade for your pretest. If you only get 6 out of 3, if you only get 2 out of 3 on your study plan for 67%, then I will use this for your pretest because it's higher than you scored on your pretest. So whatever score is bigger out of these 2 for a particular chapter, that's the score that I will update on your pretest. I can't do it in the MyLab, so MyLab is going to be calculating your grade. That's going to be lower than your actual final grade. I will calculate your grade and try to update it as much as I can in Canvas. Typically, after every single exam, we'll make sure that the grades are updated. But that's how it's going to work with the pretest and the study points. So again, if do the pretest, they are very important. They're very effective in helping students learn, even on the stuff that you get wrong. So don't think for a second, if you're getting a question wrong, that you're wasting your time on the pretest. Studies have been shown that you get a big increase in your understanding of questions, even if you get them wrong on your pretest. But again, I don't want you getting your GPA harmed because of a very effective learning technique. So you have this, keep this in your mind. If you do a pretest and you don't do well on it, do the study plan, earn those mastery points. You should be doing the study plan just because it's good practice. But again, it's used as a backup for your pretest. Any other questions about pretest homework in the MyLab? All right. Well, in that case, it's time to talk about ninjas. Okay, so what are we going to talk about ninjas for? This is a metaphor that I like to use to kind of show a little bit of what statistics is going to be like. And the metaphor of the ninja is an apt one for statisticians, because if you know statistics, especially in psychology, then you are basically the ninja of your department. So the ninja here, if you know Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe, you know that when everything goes wrong, when there's a mission to be done that cannot be done by anybody else, you call in Snake Eyes and they get the job done. If you have an understanding of stats, that is who you are. You are Snake Eyes. So we got Snake Eyes walking around in our department. His name is Dr. Fujita, and he is one of the most important people in our department for no other reason other than when your data gets weird and you don't know what to do, he's the guy that you can go and you can find out how to get to the truth. So that's the metaphor we're going to be thinking about. And when you came into this course, you probably had an idea about what you might be doing in this particular course. And it was basically the idea that you were going to be doing kind of like really cool stuff, like taking a look at psychology data, and we'll take a look at psychological situations, and we'll apply statistics to take a look at those psychology situations. And you probably thought we'd be doing awesome stuff. Please work. Never does. You thought we'd be doing awesome stuff like this, like watching video unavailable. Whoops. One moment, I'll get us there. Dun dun dun.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help.
All right, Grammarly. All right, so as I was saying, with no technical delays whatsoever, as I was saying, you probably thought of certain things that you were going to be doing when you signed up for this stats course. And those things were probably that we were going to take a look at psychological data, we're going to analyze things, analyze experiments, analyze treatments, do all that kind of cool stuff. And it's coming. It is coming. So we will be doing all the cool ninja statistics that you probably had in your mind. All right, we are going to be doing the jumping from the cliff. All right, that's like your t-test right there. All right, we are going to be analyzing, you got your NOVAs right there. All right, so we're going to be doing all this kind of stuff, but we're not going to be doing it yet. All right, so again, make sure you practice. You don't want to be that guy right there. Didn't practice enough. But we'll be doing all that kind of cool stuff. We'll be doing all that very interesting stuff, but not yet. It takes a while to get to that particular level. It takes a while to get to that place. So while I promise that at some point in this course, about the halfway point, we are going to be looking at psychology data. We are going to be using stats to analyze psychological questions. We're not quite there yet. We're going to start a little bit back, a little bit further back, and you are going to be less in the position of a ninja on an adventure and more in the position of Daniel from the Karate Kid being trained. So this is where we are right now on this first day of stats.
Walk on the road. Walk right side. Walk left side. Walk middle. Sooner or later, hit the switch just like green.
All right, so just to give you a little bit of context, this is Mr. Miyagi. He knows karate. He's agreed to teach Daniel karate. This is Daniel. He's getting bullied. He needs a little bit of self-protection in order to deal with his new situation. So he just asked Daniel if he's ready. And Daniel goes, yeah, kind of. And he goes, no. He goes, doing karate is like a grape. Doing karate is like walking on the road. You walk on the left side, you're fine. You walk on the right side, you're fine. You walk in the middle, so, you get squished like a grape. Stats is exactly the same thing. You walk on the left side, you do the homework, you do the practice, you come to class, you do the pretest, you're going to do amazing. You walk on the right side, right? You take a look at the syllabus and you say, you know what, maybe not during the summer. Don't have the time to commit to it this summer. Maybe I'll take it in the fall. So you withdraw. You'll be completely fine. You walk in the middle, you do it so-so, you skip some classes, you don't do some homework, you think, I don't need to do any of the practice Excel sheets, you will get squished like a grape. So keep that in mind as you go on your journey through this course.
Here, karate, same thing.
Yeah, here's statistics, same thing.
Yes. Oh, karate, no. You karate, yes, so. Just like green. Understand? Yeah, I understand. Now ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's make a sacred pact. I promise to teach karate up to my heart. You promise none. I say you do. No question. That you have.
All right, so that's a little bit different for what we're going to do, all right? So I promise to teach statistics. That's my part. You promise to learn statistics. That's your part. The only difference is ask me questions if you have questions, all right? So you get to ask questions. That's a little bit different.
Yep.
First wash all around. Then you wax. Remember, dear, no question.
Yeah, but
Wax on right hand. Wax off left hand. Wax on. Wax off. Breathe into nose. Out the mouth. Wax on. Wax off. Don't forget to breathe. Very important. Wax on. Wax off. Wax on. Wax off.
And where these guys come from?
Wax on. Detroit. Wax off. On, like that, like circle. Wax off, then circle.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to do things in this course, and I'm going to suggest you do them in a specific way, and that's going to be your statistical training. And just like this looks nothing like karate training. And just like I'm sure Daniel thought, oh man, I'm going to be doing cool stuff. I'm going to be throwing punches, going to be throwing kicks. Stats is a lot like the same thing. You need to put in practice doing things over and over and over again. But just be aware that everything that is in this course is there for a reason. It's there for a purpose. So when Daniel's son was getting trained by Mr. Miyagi, he spent a lot of time waxing cars. And he spent a lot of time sanding the floor. And he spent a lot of time painting the fence. And some of his friends would say, hey, you want to go to the beach? And he'd be like, no, man, I can't. I got to paint this fence. It's going to be the exact same thing in statistics. We're going to spend a lot of time doing some things that don't really look like statistics. And you're going to have a lot of things to do in here. So whereas Daniel had wax on, wax off, you're going to have pretests on and pretests off. And you're going to have in-class practice on. And you're going to have extra practice on. And you're going to have post-tests on. And you're going to have homework on. You're going to have all these things that you're doing. And the reason we're doing them is going to be shown in this next scene. So we're going to do these things over and over and over again because we need to get it to the point where it's automatic, where you don't need to think about the small things so that we can then build upon the bigger things. So in this next scene here, this is where we're going to get to. Daniel has been waxing cars for a long time. He's been sanding the floor. He's been painting the fence. He's been doing nothing that looks like karate. And finally, he's fed up. Finally, he's had enough, and he confronts Mr. Miyagi. And this is the outcome of it. So Mr. Miyagi is now calling on his skills and showing him what's been going on this whole time.
So he wax on, wax on. Yeah! That! 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 Show me make the fence. That! Face! That! That! Show me sight the face. That! 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 Show me sight the floor. That! That! Face! Face!
All right, so what's happened here? Daniel has gotten basically muscle memory. He doesn't even have to think about the movements. The movements are automatic, because he did it so often, because he learned the basics so much. That's what we do here in this course. You're going to be doing stuff over and over and over again. And I want you to get to that point where you no longer have to think about it, where you're no longer sitting there going, how do I do a t-test? Is it like this, where it's just boom, automatic, because what's going to happen is that when we get to the more complicated tests in the back half of this course, you will have learned the fundamentals so well that when some complex string of statistical stuff comes at you, you're going to have this particular reaction, and rather than having to think about it, it's going to be automatic. All right, so that's why we're going to be doing what we're going to be doing. It might not look like stats, it might not look like what you were expecting at the beginning, but that is the road that we are going to be on. And when that final exam comes, when that big scary final exam comes, or if you're a psych major, when your advanced lab comes and it starts coming at you and you're a little intimidated, you're going to remember this course and you're going to kick that exam in the face. And at the end of the course, that's going to be you, all super happy that you learned stats. That's going to be me, all super satisfied that you learned stats. But it all starts with the practice, with the journey, with doing the little things over and over again so that they become very automatic. And I promise you, we will do the cool stuff. We will look at actual statistics that was done in child development studies, in memory studies, in studies on cognitive intelligence. We'll take a look at all of those eventually, but not right now. It all builds with what we're doing right now. So again, make sure that you're doing that. Make sure that you're trusting in me and saying, you know what? I might not want to wax the floor one more time with this Excel sheet, but you know what? Let's do it. Let's get it done. And you'll have that awesome outcome at the end. All right, so let's get going on that. We'll start off with, again, the two pieces of new math that you're going to learn in this course, the only two pieces, and we're going to start with a look at statistical notation. So statistics, very nicely, actually uses some general mathematical notation. So it does borrow symbols and things from math, like addition signs, like equal signs, like all those, a lot of the mathematical notations. But it also has some of its own notation. So one example of that is scores for a particular variable. They are represented by a single large capital X. So when statisticians collect scores, they represent those scores as a single large capital X. So if I was to collect the ages of everybody in this classroom, I would have, what do we got, 12, I would have 12 scores, and those ages, I would represent them as just an X. So this would stand in for the 12 ages. When I took a look at those 190 reviews of Captain Marvel, my 190 reviews were represented by X. So this one big X represents however many scores you have on a particular variable. If you got 20 scores, X represents 20 scores. If you interview 50 people, X represents 50 scores. It just represents how many scores you have for that. Sorry, it represents the scores that you have for any particular thing that you've measured, any particular variable. All right, so one of the things that's very common in statistics is summation. Adding up your scores is a very common thing that people do in stats. And it's so common and it's so important that it gets its own terminology, it gets its own symbol, it gets the Greek letter sigma. So that is your Greek letter sigma, and this is going to be the first time I'm introducing this idea. Very, very important idea in this class. Whenever you come across a term or a symbol, read it in your mind, read it out loud as what that symbol is. So when you see this, do not ever read that as sigma. Read that as the sum of. So every single time you see that in your textbook, think and read the sum of. Because what that's going to do is that's going to train you into understanding what that symbol means. So if you read that as the sum of, and you practice reading that capital X as the scores, well then this function here becomes the sum of the scores. So if you do that every single time you come across this in homework, in your reading, you'll have 40, 50, 60 times practice reading this as the sum of and reading this as the scores. And what that means is that when you sit down to your exam and you see this, and you will see this on exam number 1, when you sit down to your exam and you see this, you're going to be sitting there going, all right, this is the sum of, this is the scores. That makes sense to my human brain. The sum of the scores. I know what to do. I take the scores and I sum them. Sum of the scores. If, on the other hand, you've been reading this as sigma x the whole time, when you sit down to that exam, you will read this as sigma x. And what sigma x means to our human brains is nothing. You'll sit there going, what is sigma x? So get into that practice. Sigma, the sum of, x, the scores. You'll see me do it myself in this class. I will not read this as sigma x. This will be read as the sum of the scores. So that is your first new piece of math. Sigma, the sum of, means add everything up. So that's your first new piece of math. If you see the sum of the scores, then if your scores are 20, 15, 5, 10, if those are your scores, then you add this up and you got 50. So the sum of the scores equals, in this case, 50. All right, so that's your first new piece of math. Here comes your second. Because this is summation, because this is the sum of, it fits into the order of operations. So that order of operations that you learned in high school needs to have one little tweak, because the sum of, this sigma has VIP status amongst summation. It has VIP status amongst addition. So we need to give it that special status. So in terms of your order of operations, we still start with parentheses. What's in those parentheses? We then do any exponents. We then do any multiplying and or dividing, and we do this from left to right, just like we read. That's the convention. We then, and this is your second piece of new mathematics, we then do any summation with the summation symbol. We do any summation with sigma. It comes first. It comes before any other addition or subtraction. Once you do summation with the summation symbol, then you finish it off doing any other addition and subtraction. So let's take a look at an example of what this would entail. So if you have this complicated function right here, you want to solve for what this function is. What number is this function going to give us? Well, we have to attack it in a certain order. Just like verbal language has to be read in a certain order, mathematical language has to be read in a certain order. And just like verbal language is in the order that it is, because people just agreed that's the order it should be, mathematical language is in the order that it is, simply because people agreed, let's just do it that way. So in this case here, if we wanted to solve this equation, first thing we would do is what's in parentheses. So the first thing we would do is we would take the scores minus 1. And when you see the scores minus 1, what that means is you take 1 away from every single score. So it's a way of transforming the scores, each individual score, into a new score. So whenever you see something happening to the scores, it happens to all of them. It happens to the entire set of the scores. So we take the scores minus 1, that's our first move. We then do the next thing, which is exponents. So next in our order is exponents. So one of the things that we need to keep in mind with order of operations is that whatever we left off with, that's what we start the next step with. So when we do the scores minus 1, we're done with that. Now when we're doing exponents, we do it on the scores minus 1. So that means that these numbers here now each get squared. All right, so that's our next move. So then once we do exponents, we then do any multiplication or division going left to right. So importantly, do it left to right, because getting divided by 7 and then multiplied by 2 is vastly different than multiplying 7 by 2 and then getting divided by 14. All right, it's a convention that people have agreed upon. We've all agreed to do math this way so that we can understand each other. So what we would do is we would take, once again, each of these scores and divide it by 7. And then whatever they turned into, we would take each of those scores and multiply them by 2. And we're done with any multiplication or division going left to right. Then we have our VIP summation with the summation sign. And we do anything that has the summation with the summation sign. And in this case, we are summing that whole big function that we just did. And when you sum, you go from a set of scores down to one score. So we take whatever number this is, whatever numbers, our scores have turned into, and we add all of them up. And that is our summation. So one thing that's going to happen is after summation, you're going to take a whole set of scores and end up with one number. So that is something to keep in mind when you do summation. And then finally, we finish it off with addition and subtraction. We got that 1 minus 1. You will be amazed how much minus 1 happens in the universe. If a statistician sees minus 1 all the time, computer programmers see minus 1 all the time, the universe just seems to have minus 1. So get ready for it. We take our sum and we take 1 away. All right, so that was you watching summation. Let's actually do some summation. So, as I mentioned before, we need to actually do stats. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to have a set of practice problems. I'll go through with you some of the initial ones, and then we'll turn it over to some practice time for the end of this second hour. So if you haven't already, I suggest you go to Canvas, and let me just real quick duplicate this so I can see what you guys see. We're still back on the ninjas here. All right, so you're looking for this. So if you haven't already, go into Canvas. It's in your, it's in the files section. You should see a folder that says Excel practice files. Open it up and enable editing. You'll see this little yellow warning band at the top of your Excel sheet. Make sure that you click on enable editing so that you can edit the Excel sheet. And once people are ready to go, we will kind of do this live and see how it all goes. All right. I'll give you a couple of minutes to try to open those. Does anybody not have it open? Yeah. So, in that case, yeah, watch it on YouTube video later on. Follow that kind of All right, so it looks like everybody's good to go. All right, so let's start up on this Excel sheet. Okay, so what we got right here to start off with, we have our data. So taking a look at this data right here, we have our participants, and they're simply numbers. So what that means is that we got 12 participants. We got 12 clients, we got 12 patients, we got 12 subjects. We've collected scores from 12 people, and we collect 3 scores per each individual. So this is like testing somebody on 3 different things. So if this was educational psychology, this might be their aptitude for English, this might be their aptitude for math, and this might be their aptitude for music. Right? We've given them 3 different tests, and we scored them on those 3 different measures. All right, so let's get going on the question number 1 here. So in question number 1, when I do these Excel sheets, practice sheets, and also your exam is going to look a lot like this as well. These yellow answer cells, this is where your final answer needs to go in order to be graded. So whenever you see these answer cells, these yellow cells will always be yellow. That indicates where your final answer has to end up. And these black outlined boxes here, that is where your work has to be contained inside. So I will make sure that you have enough space to do your work in those boxes, but do not insert rows, do not insert columns, do not go outside that box, and your practice Excel sheets and exams will work fine. All right, so let's take a look at this. So we want the sum of the X scores, right? So we have the sum of the X scores. These Y scores, they're a different set of scores. The Z scores are a different set of scores. If we took a 4th measure, it would be W, and then just working backwards through the alphabet. Typically, you don't need more than 3 or 4. But anyways, we want the sum of the X scores. So we want the sum of all of these scores down here. Now, one thing that we could do is we could just take out our calculator and put in all of those scores and hit equals, and it'll give us a sum. But what we want to start doing is we want to start giving anything that humans do poorly and letting Excel do that for us. So one thing that humans do really badly are repetitive things exactly. Your finger will slip, something will go wrong. So we want to make sure that we're using Excel as much as we can. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to this cell right down here, and we're going to put in equals, and that's going to let Excel know that we're going to give it a function. So equals is your way of telling Excel, I'm about to give you a function. And then you start typing, in this case, sum, S-U-M, and that tells Excel what function you're trying to tell it to do. So equals is what lets it know you're giving it a function. And then in this case, we want the sum function. We want a summation function. Now you'll notice that Excel tries to guess, what is it that you're trying to do? Are you trying to, which of these formulas do you want to do? And this is a great little feature, because if you click on these formulas, you'll notice that it gives you a little description. This is a great way as you're learning to just double check that you got the right function, that you're using the right function. So for example, we want to add up all of our scores, and Excel is letting us know, hey, that sum function, that adds all the numbers in a range of cells. And that's exactly what we want to do. So we got confidence that we're on the right formula. So once we have sum in there, next thing we got to do is hit that open parentheses. Open parentheses lets Excel know that you are now going to give it numbers. So equals lets it know you're giving it a function. Sum lets it know which function. Open parentheses lets it know you're about to give it numbers. And then what you want to do is you want to click on that top score in the X cells, and you can do this a variety of different ways. You can click and drag, is the one that I just used there. Click and drag, but you basically want to highlight all of those X scores. Once you highlight those X scores, we can go Shift, close the parentheses, and then we hit Enter, and we have our sum of the X scores. So once again, equals lets Excel know that you're giving it a function. Sum is the function's name. Open parentheses lets Excel know that you're going to give it numbers. Highlight the cells that contain those numbers. Close your parentheses, hit Enter, and Excel will calculate the sum of the X scores all for you. All right, does anybody not have 518? Worked out? Okay. So the next thing we got to do is we got to put 518 into that yellow answer cell. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait. Yeah. You got the extra practice one. Sorry about that. Okay, so if your scores do not match, the extra practice, that is an additional Excel sheet that I put together for like practice at home. The one that we're using right now is just practice. Okay, that should have probably said that. Okay, so it's this one right here. Yeah, sorry about that. All right, so I'll give everybody a chance who had the other one open to get that in. So you're looking for these numbers, and 518 will be the sum that you'll get. So as we wait for that, I'll just let you know that the last thing we need to do right now, or the next step that we need to do, is to get that answer into the answer cell. And the one thing that you absolutely do not want to do is enter it manually into the answer cell. So I know that at this stage, it is super easy and very tempting to go, okay, the answer was 518, so I'll put 518 into that answer cell. And if you scroll down to where the grading functions are, you will see that, yeah, you got it correct. 518 is the correct answer. You do not want to do that for two reasons. Number one, sometimes we're going to have decimal places. And if you manually enter it, you are going to round off and introduce error very early. And as psychologists, we do not want to do that, because error can compound and basically lead to really large errors after a string of calculations are done. So much like in chaos theory, that little butterfly that flaps its wings in Africa and there's a hurricane in Texas because of it, your rounding errors can build. And when you're dealing with people's lives, as we are in psychology, we cannot allow that to happen. So we don't want to manually enter it, number one, for that reason. Number two, you're human and you don't want to do things that you can tend to make errors in. And I don't know how many students I have seen get a question right and then enter it in to Excel manually, and there's just a slip of the finger. There's just a momentary lapse of reason or whatever goes on. There's human error that gets introduced, and instead of 518, we get 51.8. This is not acceptable because, again, we're psychologists. So if you give somebody 10 times their required dosage, your supervisor is not going to matter that, well, I can calculate the dosage correctly. It's a little human error. Can I get part marks for calculating knowing how to calculate it? No, we are dealing with results. We're dealing with end results here. So we got to make sure that it's exact. Because of that, we want to get into the practice of putting our answers into these answer cells using the equal sign. So we put in equals into the answer cell, and then we just click where our answer is. We hit enter, and Excel does it for us. It does it exactly. It carries all of the decimal places if there are any. It does it very exactly and very well. So once again, let's do the sum of y. We have equals for a function. Sum is a function that we want. Open parentheses, highlight your scores, close your parentheses, hit enter. We find a sum of 678. Go to the answer cell, put equals, highlight where your answer is, hit enter, and we put our answer in there using the equals function, and we go on down and we see that we got that one correct as well. And then I think a lot of you might have worked ahead because I don't hear any keyboards typing. So once again, just to round it out for the z-scores, equals lets Excel know that you're giving it a function. Sum is the name of the function. Open parentheses, highlight the scores, close your parentheses. We get the sum of the z-scores in this case. Don't fall for that temptation to just manually enter it. Use the equals function to get that number into your yellow answer cell. Hit enter, and we see that we got question number 1 correct. All right. Did anybody not get those numbers? Awesome. All right, so let's go on to question number 2. And this will basically round out our practice on this portion here. So question number 2 here, we have 4 separate questions. We want the sum of the scores minus 1. We want the sum of the scores squared. We want the sum of 2 times the scores. And we want the sum of the scores minus 1. So let's work through each of these in turn. So we're going to start off with this top one here. The sum of, in parentheses, the scores minus 1. Whenever you have more than one thing that you need to do, you have to go to order of operations. You got to do it in order. So we ask ourselves, is there anything in parentheses? Yes, there is. So what's in parentheses? The scores minus 1. So the easiest way to do this, set up a column, name it something that your human mind can remember. So in this case, we're just going to call it scores minus 1. X minus 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the equals function, and we're going to take 1 away from each of these numbers. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, this is minus 1. I could probably just do this. And I know you can, because you could go, all right, 56 minus 1 is 55. 35 minus 1 is 34. 71 minus 1 is 70. 90 minus 1 is 89. I have seen students do that and go like 15 minus 1 is 14, 55 minus 1 is 56, 21 minus 1 is 20, and you'll notice something went horribly wrong. All right, you can do it right 20 times, get it wrong once, and it'll mess up your entire calculation. So we want to make sure that we're letting Excel do this. So we're going to go to equals. We're going to go to our cell that has our score in it, and you can either click on it or you can use the arrow keys to move these highlighted cells around. So we find the cell that has our score in it, and then we click -1, we hit enter, and we let Excel do it for us. So once again, equals, highlight the cell where your score is, -1, and we hit enter. So one more time, equals, highlight the cell where your score is, -1, and we hit enter. And the other thing that you'll find, we're not going to do it this hour, we will do it soon, is that Excel is very powerful when you're doing something over and over and over again. So it would be a little bit of a not so useful program if we had 1,000 scores and we had to take one away from each of them and we had to keep putting in equals -1, equals -1. So there is a way to do that very, very quickly. But we're at the point right now where we want to wax on, wax off a little bit. So make sure that you do those for all 12. And I'll give you a little bit of time to finish those scores. Usually more clacking. You guys might know that trick. All right. Does anybody need more time to calculate the -1s? Oh, perfect. Okay. So we go back up here. We've done what's in parentheses. We go through our order of operations. Any exponents? No. Any multiplication and division? No. Any summation with the summation sign? Yes. So we got summation with the summation symbol. So we want to sum the scores -1. So we go equals sum, open parentheses, and then importantly, we highlight what we just did to the scores, what we just transformed our scores into, close those parentheses, hit equals, and we get our answer of 506. Put that into our yellow answer cell with the equal sign, scroll on down, and we see that we got that one correct. All right, so does everybody have 506? All right, off to squared. All right, so next one here, we have the sum of the scores squared. So again, order of operations, what do we need to do? Parentheses first, no parentheses. Next thing is exponents. We have exponent. So we go up here, we're going to set up another column. We're just going to call it again something that will jog our human memories in terms of what's in that column. So we'll call it x squared because that'll help us remember. And we go equals. Notice that it's the original scores squared. So it's your original x scores, this column over here. And then for squares, that little upside down V that you can find when you go Shift 6 on your keyboard, that little upside down V is Excel's notation for to the exponent 2. So we're going to put our score to the exponent 2, and then we just indicate which exponent. In this case, it's to the exponent 2. And we hit equals, and it's calculated 56 squared. We do it again, equals, highlight the score, Shift 6 for the exponent. Tell it what exponent you want. We want it to square it. We hit equals. We got 35 squared. We do it one more time, equals, highlight the score, Shift 6 for exponents, 2 to let it know that it's that exponent squared. We hit enter, and then once again, we'll see how to do that quickly for all of them. But for right now, make sure that you're working through and get those 12 scores in there. All right, does anybody need more time for the squared calculations? Okay. So what's going on here is you're doing the score minus 1 squared. This is just the score.
Oh, so this.
Yep. All right, so just because of time constraints, we'll go on to the next step. You'll have time to complete this during the practice time, but once you have all the scores all squared and ready to go, you take a look again, order of operations, multiplication and division, we don't have any. Next thing, summation with the summation symbol, we do. So again, in this case, you're summing whatever your scores have become. So your scores are now been squared. We want to sum those scores squared. So once again, we go to the bottom of the column. We put in equals, sum, open parentheses, highlight those scores that we just squared. And the sum of the scores squared is this huge number, 32,654. And once again, we don't want to open up human error and make a mistake entering that in. So we use the equals function, highlight our answer, and use that to put the answer in there, and we see we got that one correct. All right. Next one here, we have the sum of 2 times the scores. So we're going to put, again, just a little thing to remind us what we're doing up there in that top column. And now we want to take each of those original scores and multiply them by 2. So whenever you're doing multiplication or division in Excel, what you want to do is you highlight, again, the score that you want to multiply or divide. If you're doing multiplication, it's the asterisk. The shift 8 is the symbol that you're looking for. That's for multiplication. If you're doing division, whoops, it's the backslash. So asterisk for multiplication, backslash for division. In this case, we're doing multiplication, so we go to the asterisk. That tells us to multiply the score. We got to tell Excel what to multiply it by. We want to multiply it by 2. We hit enter, and we see that Excel has multiplied 56 by 2, giving us 112. Once again, for the next one, we highlight our score, 35. Shift 8 gives us the asterisk. 2 is what we want to multiply it by. We hit enter. We get 2 times 35 is 70. And we continue on. Once again, equals. Highlight that score, shift 8 for the asterisk, 2 is what we're multiplying by, and we hit enter. And again, coming very soon, little shortcuts that'll let you do that very, very quickly. But again, we got to learn, let that practice get into our kind of muscle memory for this procedure. All right, so hopefully you're close to finishing up the 2 times your final scores. So let's go to the next step. So we did 2 times the scores, no division, next thing that we do is summation with the summation symbol. So once again, we've transformed our scores. We want to sum 2 times our scores. So we go equals sum open parentheses, highlight the scores that we just calculated. We hit enter and we see that sum of 2 times the scores is 1036. Pop that into our our answer cell using the equals function. And we can see that we have that one correct as well. All right, so let's round up this final stage of practice here. So the last one here I've included for 2 reasons. Number one, very common in statistics, actually very common in the universe, that a lot of our calculations have -1 attached to it. The other reason is because this is by far the most common mistake that is done in order of operations in statistics. And the mistake is not to give that summation symbol, that sigma symbol, not to give it that VIP status that it deserves. So right here we have a question or an equation that says the sum of the scores -1. So we go through and we say to ourselves, all right, any parentheses? No. Next step, any exponents? No. Next step, any multiplication or division? No. And what occurs over and over again, the error that is made very commonly is that when students go to the next step, for some reason, they forget about summation's special status. They forget about its VIP, it gets to go first type status, and they do the -1 first. That's the big error. So what we do here is we take a look at it and say, all right, multiplication and division? No. What's the next step? Summation is the next step. So we need to sum the X scores. Without doing anything else to them, we sum the X scores. So we've done that before. We can go to the column where our X scores are. We put in equals sum. We sum up those scores. Close those parentheses. And we find that the sum of the scores is 518. Then we're ready for the next step. We're done summation. Next we do any addition or subtraction. We have a subtraction of 1. And you can do this one because it's kind of simple. We can do it right in the answer cell. So we put equals, highlight where the sum of the scores is, do -1, hit that, and we go down and we see that we got that correct. All right, so notice that it's important to get that order correct because I have both of them up there to illustrate this point. The sum of the scores -1 in parentheses does not equal the sum of the scores -1 with that scores -1 outside of parentheses. They are 2 massively different values. And again, we have to make sure that we're doing them correctly in the order that was intended. All right, so that is what I wanted to cover for this second part. Before we wrap it up and have our kind of practice/break time, I just want to mention that we do have extra practice here. So question number 3, that's the one that we had in the slides. If you can do question number 3, you are in a very good position in terms of where you should be in this course. So question number 2 is kind of where I hope everybody's at. But if you can figure out question number 3, you are really doing well in terms of where we need to be. And then question number 4, 5, question numbers 4 and 5, those are even like more advanced. So if you want a little bit more of a challenge, feel free to do those. The one thing that I'll mention for that is that it involves multiplying scores together. So for example, if you see X and Y scores written right next to each other, that means take each X score and multiply it by its corresponding Y score. So you take, in this case, 56 for participant number 1 and you multiply it by 90. All right, so let's wrap up the this second part here. So we just went through the practice Excel sheet. I highly recommend try to complete it, get that extra practice in, start working on that mental muscle memory. And because practice, especially in these early stages, is so important, there's actually an extra practice Excel sheet that is very much like the one that we just went through, but again, let you go over it a few more times in order to solidify that those abilities. Just again, a shout out for the Quiz Me options. Earn your mastery points if you don't get 100% on your pretest. And actually earn your mastery points even if you do. It's a good way to continue to practice a lot of these skills. Just know that for your scores, for it to count towards your pretest, it's the mastery points that you earn. So you will see that each chapter has maybe like 3 mastery points, 4 mastery points. Those are the ones that contribute to your score, so you can get 100% on those. And then just one more time, this is the mastery points. So if you look at your study plan, you have the practice options. The Quiz Me part is where you can earn those mastery points. And you'll see that in each chapter, there's a certain number of mastery points that are available. Earn 100% of those, you'll get 100% for your pretest score. And that is it that I wanted to do for this second part. So let's take a 10-minute break this time. Because that's what we did last time. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll start up again at 11:40. And if you have any questions or anything, for example, when we're working on the Excel sheet, let me know. I'll come by and I'll give you a hand on that.